So Super Rugby round 11 Friday game sees us with two games. One in New Zealand with the Hurricanes taking on the Sunwolves, and then the second over in South Africa with the Stormers hosting the Rebels. So we've got all conferences in action with these two games. Kind of important for different reasons. The Hurricanes, as I ever go on about trying to maintain points in the New Zealand Conference, just with how tight some of those teams are. The Hurricanes got a game in hand now on the Crusaders, so they'll be looking to put some points on here. Sunwolves' mission is pretty much from here on out just win any game possible against the Hurricanes. May not be the best one to be choosing for a win, but still encouraging performance last week against the Crusaders, so you never know, pretty much, but sports, funny things have happened. The Stormers kind of at that the bottom end, or the bottom of the South African Conference, chasing a playoff spot, maybe, barely. The Rebels kind of at the bottom of the playoff spots, trying to maintain position with a few tough fixtures coming up. So for the first game, this tour of New Zealand for the Sunwolves, I mean, if there's two teams you didn't want to play away, it's probably the Crusaders and the Hurricanes. And when you're the bottom team, having to go in and face those two teams is a pretty daunting prospect. It doesn't get any easier after last week. If nothing else, they can kind of go into this one with not a lot of pressure on them, because they are expected to get absolutely thrashed, and anything other than that is pretty much moral victory for them. Like last week, people for the most part giving them props on kind of holding up the Crusaders and putting a few points of their own on. For this one, the Hurricanes are back from a bye, and it's maybe a chance to kind of ease some of the players back in. I think we can probably expect that if the game's in the bag pretty early on, that some big name players will get kind of subbed early. But yeah, for the Sunwolves, they'll really go into this one with their head held high after that pretty, just decent performance against the Crusaders last week in pretty atrocious conditions. So hopefully we'll get better weather in Wellington this week. For the Canes, they've named a really strong team. Like, most of their big guns are playing. They're not putting out a B team. Fafita and Laumapi, though, are being rested as part of kind of the All Blacks requirements to rest All Blacks for a couple of games this season. So they've chosen to do that for this one. It kind of makes sense. Christie is in at 9. Adi Savia is bracketed in at 7 with Henwood, so he might start. Nihi Milner-Skudder is the story of this one, though, in that he's been named on the bench. Hasn't played since October last year, so it'll be finally good to see him back on the field and hopefully able to get a decent run of good health, because the guy's had a few injuries over his time. The Sunwolves are pretty much unchanged. A couple of changes in the front row sees Hori back at the 2 jersey, and Asahara switches from the bench to start at number 3. Expectations is just the Hurricanes by as many as they can imagine. Bonus point, absolutely crucial. Nothing less will be acceptable, really. Avoid injuries. Just keep pressure on with the other top dogs at the top of the table. And give some guys like Nihi Milner-Skudder some minutes if possible, because this is a great chance to get them kind of on board for the season. For the Sunwolves, it's the same story as last week. Go into this one, just try not to be embarrassed. If they did get embarrassed, they certainly wouldn't be the first team to get embarrassed by the Hurricanes at home. They're a pretty hard team to play against. So, whatever happens, not whatever happens. If they get beaten by 80 points, then that's pretty rough, and then they will be on the receiving end of some flack. But if it's 30, 40 points, I don't think too many eyelids will be kind of raised by that one. Eyebrows. The bookies yesterday had the Canes by 39. As I looked this morning, they'd gone up to 40. So predicted to win this one in an absolute one-sided affair. For the next one, the Stormers take on the Rebels at Newlands in Cape Town. you notice the Stormers have played 9 games with 3 wins and 6 losses, but this is only their 4th game at home all season. So they've been on a pretty rough. I know I've been going on about their schedule, but they've played 2/3 of their games away. It's hard, and it just means they've got to kind of catch up with all these home games because they haven't been able to do it on the road yet. They haven't lost at home. All 3 victories have been at home. They've always looked pretty good. The Reds game was a bit patchy, but they still looked in control for all that game. For the Rebels, they're still in a playoff spot, like I said, and just behind the Waratahs in the Aussie Conference for top spot, but they have never won in Africa. So going in to face an undefeated at home Stormers team is by no means an easy prospect. In terms of the players, the Stormers have brought Engelbrecht back on the wing and Cobus van Wyk is on the flank, so Peter Steph du Toit moves into the second row. Cobus Visa and Sinatla are back on the bench, so that's good news for them. For the Rebels, Ainsley starts ahead of Talakai in the front row. Tamani's back at 6, so a bit of size there. Billy Meeks is back in the midfield, so that pushes Tom English out to the wing. Maddox moves to fullback because there's no Dane Halep-Petty. He's another guy having kind of a rough season in terms of his health. The Stormers, I mean, in terms of their season, it looks pretty tough going forward. But if there's one thing to perhaps salvage it, it's the fact that they've only played 3 games at home. So you got to think most other teams have got an extra away game on them, whereas they've got 1 extra at home. It's probably not going to be enough, but if they can finally pick up some away victories and then hold at home, stranger things have happened. But yeah, like I said with the Sunwolves one, it's going to be a long shot for them. A bonus point win over the Rebels would definitely help kind of put them at least on the right track after a pretty iffy first half of the season. And yeah, we'll just ease pressure off the coach, who's been under a lot of scrutiny with the performances. For the Rebels, coming off 3 losses in a row, ever since that Hurricanes kind of game where they got beaten pretty handily at home, it's not looked great. But if they could win this one, it'll put them above the Waratahs in first spot in the Aussie Conference, which is really what Coach Dave Wessels is targeting, I think, more than anything else. And yeah, it would certainly lift the heads of the guys who, like I said, are on a 3-match losing run. So the Stormers are pretty heavy favourites for this one. Bookies have got them by 13. And then, the Tars are on a bye, so it's definitely a good chance to pass them. So we will see what happens. What do you guys think is going to go on? Who you picking? Bookies have got 2 pretty handy home favourites, so it's looking that way, but you never know. We'll see what happens, and yeah, I'll talk to you guys again another time.